Michigan State players snubbed at the Big Ten Awards. It's the biggest crime against humanity, and oh my God, I'm just shaking with rage over here. Get real. All right, we could talk about it with Greg Waddell of Sleepers Media. Let's go.
You are Locked On Spartans, your daily podcast on the Michigan State Spartans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Spartan friends, Spartan family, Locked On Spartans listeners, thank you so much for chewing up some of your day with us here at Locked On Spartans, your team in green and white 5 days a week. Please rate, review, subscribe, comment below, smash that 5-star button, do whatever makes you happy because we could all use a little happiness these days. Now, we got Greg Waddell, friend of the program, does incredible work over at Sleepers Media. We're going to talk about a lot here. We're going to talk about, Michigan State basketball. We're going to talk about the Big Ten tournament. We're going to get into his embarrassment of a team here at the end of the show. But first, we're going to talk about my embarrassment of a team, your embarrassment of a team, Spartan Nation. But first, I'll be a good host here. Hey, Greg. Hey, buddy. How you doing, man? Doing okay?
I'm doing great. I was already excited when you sent me the rundown a couple of days ago. I felt like there was some fun topics for the two of us to get into. And the Michigan State fan base, by now, if you're familiar with my work, knows we have a very love-hate relationship. But you seem particularly fired up about some things. And then you messaged me that you're going to blow up the rundown and you have some stuff to get off your chest. I think we're wired very similarly on this, Matt. So this should be fun.
Big Ten awards come out today. I see you come across my timeline. Don't think much of it. Tyson Walker, second team. Now, can I get fired up and, argue that, hey, he was snubbed for first team? He's the fifth leading scorer in the Big Ten? Sure, I guess. They got two other guys, A.J. Hogard, Malik Hall, that made honorable mention. I guess I can get fired up about them not making second or third team, whatever. I have a hard time doing that now. Greg, 4 out of the last 5 they have lost, and quite frankly, that fifth game, I don't really know if they deserve to win that fifth game. They're hanging on to their tournament chances by a dear thread. Greg, do you have it in you to defend some of these players? Because I got to say, not over here. I'm not going to be crying over it.
I don't. I actually will defend one. I'll start on a positive note, and then I'll
Thank you. Okay.
The rest. I am sad and a bit surprised that Malik Hall did not earn third team honorees at minimum. We don't get a ballot here in Sleepers Media World, but we did do a video the other day on who our votes would be, and we went through first through third team. And to me, Malik was the first name I had on the third team list. I think that if you've watched this team every game this season, you can't come away with anything but admiration for how consistent he's become, when the story of his career has been the guy who was so inconsistent he could never put it together, and it was always flashes. It was one game every month where you're like, whoa, what if that happened every game? Well, we have 2 months now of this happening every single game, and honestly, without him doing it, they wouldn't even be on the bubble right now, I don't think. And instead, I still believe, I know they're on the bubble. The net loves Michigan State for all intents and purposes. This team's in the field. I don't want to argue about it. I think they're in the field. And it's Malik Hall who earned their way to it. So to me, I'm a little bit baffled he didn't get honored. But I think the Tyson complaints on first team are a little crazy. And I'm shocked that A.J. Hogard got any sort of honors.
The reason I'm so fired up right now is that, look, you see it come across your Twitter or your Facebook, wherever you're getting this news, and it's like, yeah, that all sounds about right. Sure, Malik Hall probably could have been third team, but who, quite frankly, cares? Oh, some of the players on this team care, because you also go on Twitter and you see some players talk about how Tyson's a snub. You hear another player say, like, oh, what? That's crazy. And then you hear another senior player who was an honorable mention say, all right, bet. Just complaining where they fell on these Big Ten awards. Hey, guys, just want to give a quick rundown here in case we forgot where we were here. You're the 8-seeded team in the Big Ten tournament. And, hey, newsflash, the Big Ten sucks this year. Outside of Purdue, outside of Illinois on most nights, and outside of Nebraska when they play at home, this conference is trash. And you still couldn't even become a top 7 team of this conference. So, yeah, you got rewarded like an 8-seeded team in a really bad conference. And keep in mind, you lost 4 of your last 5 games. Again, got really lucky you won that one on senior night. You're also hanging on to the tournament by a thread. And hey, if you want me to keep going and just being mean old Matt over here, why not? Because this is very relevant too. You haven't won anything relevant in your time here at Michigan State. I get the Sweet 16 game. That was fun before you got dummied by a Hobbit over at Kansas State. I get that you have maybe 3 or 4 home wins against ranked teams. You don't have any on the road in your time here. So I hate to sound like this. It's impossible to sound like this and not come off as Mr. Shut Up and Dribble. But for the love of God, shut up. Stop complaining and just win some games, because you don't get remembered here by where you fall on the All Big Ten awards. You get remembered here by hanging banners. It is that simple. I don't remember who fell on what team in 2015. I could tell you every single player in that roster that made a Final Four. I couldn't tell you where Tillman or Cassius or McQuaid stacked up in 2019. I could tell you they sacked up. They didn't pay attention on social media. They didn't cry about any awards. And they won some banners. So, Greg, I don't even have a question for you. I just need to get that off my chest, because this team just does not get it. Am I just this old curmudgeon-y guy that is just complaining about everything too hard? Am I too emotional about this team? Or is there some credence to what I'm just railing on right now? Because what are you doing complaining online about these awards? Just win.
I think there's a lot of credence. Honestly, I give you respect for doing it on a platform that
thanks.
Built here. I mean, it's not. We know from doing this daily, right? Like, people want to hear good things about their team. The Michigan State fan listeners of this show don't necessarily want to log on and hear you complaining about the fan base. But I think you're keeping it real. I think you're being honest. And look, I can tell you from a rival fan's perspective. Mm-hmm. Obviously, these last 4 years have been essentially the lowest that I can recall in my life. Like, it's rare to go 4 years without a first-team all Big Ten player at Michigan State. It's rare to go without a significant deep run beyond a Sweet 16. And I think the thing I'll remember about some of these players is not only are they worse talented, but like, they just seem to do a lot of celebrating of things that never used to be celebrated in the Michigan State program. And I think that's kind of what you're getting at. Like, my lasting memories of AJ Hoggard are like when he's flexing down 10 to the 11th place team in the Big Ten. Like, that's who that guy is to me. I think there's a lot of losing habits intrinsically with who these players are that seems to seek attention and want rewards for very mediocre results. And it is a bit surprising to see players outright be upset about it. Look, I get people loving Tyson too. Like, I want to say none of this is to be taken as a slant against Tyson.
Sure.
I think, my answer, I know it's become Jameer Young versus Tyson. I think Marcus Damask deserved the outright fit spot. He's the closer on the second best team. He's been better than Terrence Shannon for big stretches of this season. But I get why it was Jameer Young over Tyson as well. I mean, if you watch Maryland this season, it's going to sound crazy to Michigan State fans. They have less offensively at some positions than Michigan State does. Jameer, like, if he doesn't go, his averages on the year 22, 5, and 4. He has to do that every game just to even be in games against the worst teams. Whereas Michigan State, Tyson got hurt. He's not playing as well as he was in December right now, and that's a big part of the reason why Michigan State has lost 4 of the last 5. So I don't think anyone should be upset about it. I get going to war for your guy, but I think you have the right outlook here.
Maybe if these awards were dropped on Friday and let's say by some divine miracle Michigan State actually does beat Minnesota, you are squarely in the tournament. You actually got a nice win. Maybe they come out after that. Maybe I can get it, fired up enough to go to bat for Tyson, but let's just read the room. And I know it's just a few players on social media. Maybe I'm just letting two little tweets get to my head, but this whole season, it's just one after another, whether it's games, whether it's what you see on social media, whether it's quotes from Tom Izzo, which we will get to in a little bit. Craig, it's just wearing thin on me, man. And it's funny because, hey, you know what? No one's forced us to watch these games. And quite frankly, if they don't make the tournament, that means a shorter season. But here I am, like the sucker I am, begging and pleading for these guys to make the tournament so I could watch them more and get more upset for longer. This is a healthy way of living, Greg. Happy March, everyone. This is fun.
It's the beauty of March. It's the beauty of March, for real. Like I honestly, to put a positive spin on this, we saw this happen last year where the narrative of the season completely flipped. And in hindsight, we should feel foolish for allowing ourselves to do that. And remember the team that made the Sweet 16 and was a possession away from the Elite Eight, more so than the team that we had a 30-game sample size of just being okay. But the reality is, according to KenPom, Michigan State is still better this year than they were last year.
Isn't that crazy?
If the exact same March results happen again, I can promise you this fan base will feel differently about it. That's where you get to rewrite your legacy, like it or not. And if these players want to prove everyone wrong, if they truly do believe that nobody understands who they really are and they're being slighted, then you have one final opportunity to back it up and change it.
Look at Greg Waddell coming here with the positivity, the only shreds of positivity in this first segment. Noted friend of the Michigan State fan base, Greg Waddell. You're the man. Look at you, man. We got more to come. We're going to get into some recent Izzo quotes, a little bit of today's press conference, and some from after the game against Indiana. But first, need to talk your ears off about eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. Now, I would put eBay Motors on first team all Big Ten if they were somehow somewhat eligible, because they always deliver. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you are looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or it's your hard-earned money back. Because with eBay Motors, hey, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car to the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Now let's drag him back on here. Friend of the program, Greg Waddell of Sleepers Media. Just always fantastic work. And more to come. I saw your schedule for this upcoming week for championship week, and that looks like a 14-minute a night sleep schedule for old Greg over there. So Godspeed over there. Go get him.
Yeah, we're losing our minds over here, Matt. That's all.
I don't know how you do it.
I have no explanation for it, but we chug along.
And you guys do fantastic while you do it. It's not just quantity, it's also quality over there at Sleepers Media. Let's get into some recent quotes from Tom Izzo. Of course, there's the post-game quote that he was kind of complaining that, hey, his team shot too many threes to start the game. Okay, this is a team that shoots 35% from the year. It's not elite, but it is 71st best in the country. It's something that Michigan State does well. They also take the 320th most threes in the country. By and large, they don't take enough threes, in my opinion. That was one of the post-game comments after the Indiana game where I'm scratching my head being like, tell me how that makes sense. Like, because it's not like we have a front court presence where we could just dump it down low and get easy points down low. I don't necessarily love living and dying by the mid-range jumper, but I think one head coach in East Lansing doesn't mind doing that. Is that one of the more bizarre quotes that you've heard, Greg? Or do you think that Michigan State shot too many threes against Indiana? I think I know your answer.
Yeah, I promised to the listeners I didn't force Matt to give me these topics today, but they're right up my alley, so I appreciate it. Yeah. To give Tom Izzo the benefit of the doubt, which is something, if you've ever listened to me, I very rarely do. To give him the benefit of the doubt, I think that he was trying to discuss the first 10 minutes of this game and not the full 40 minutes of the game. That was my read when I actually watched the video of the quote, which I would have to go back and look at the numbers and the type of shots that they took. But I believe they started the game something like 1 for 8 from 3 and just couldn't buy a bucket. So to that extent, I can understand feeling like you settled. In general, I do think a massive issue for Michigan State, both this season and last season during the regular season, was that they don't shoot enough threes. Like last year when you had Joey Hauser, especially, you saw how good of a shooting team they were. Like that's why people believed in them to make a March run. They were third in the country in 3-point percentage. And in that March run, I mean, they didn't shoot still as many threes as I think they could have. They were really cold against Marquette. They ended up making 13 against Kansas State, which is part of why that game was competitive. But I think like this season, you lose Hauser, you replace him with Hall, who has been great, but is not a comfortable 3-point shooter. He will shoot 1 to 2 a game, and that's about it. And he'd much prefer to step in. It has really killed the spacing of this team. And the result is, the percent still looks good. They shoot 36% as a team. That's 68th in the country, but they're 322nd in 3-point attempt rate. The hard part for me is they don't shoot enough threes, but they also are a half-court team. Like the early 2000s, the best Tom Izzo teams were run and gun, get stops, get out, and sprint. This team's 303rd in tempo in the sport. And to me, the personnel dictates you need to run more. The half-court struggles where you end up with Tyson Walker and Malik Hall taking really tough shots every time because you don't have a center and because A.J. Hogarth's a liability in the half-court. You add it all up, and the formula for this team is a really frustrating formula that when Tyson Walker's hurt, you get results of 53 points and 57 points and struggles that you're seeing right now.
That might be the most baffling part of this season. In a season with no shortage of options, the fact that they're 303rd in tempo, because just the roster makeup says that this team should be able to run. They got athletic freaks. I mean, it's not like the world's greatest shooting team, so you can rely on that. I digress. They are who they are at this point after 31 games this season. But let's just talk about a little bit about this 32nd game coming up Thursday noon. Now, you bravely said right at the top that, hey, even if they lose this game, they're probably in the field. And that probably is true, but I am panicking over here. I'm not going to lie, Greg. What's your early read on this game? By all indications right now, the computers have Michigan State favored by 6. This is a team that Michigan State split against. Do you have an early read? Because Minnesota's also stumbling to the finish line here this season, too.
I do have a read. I think this is a much better matchup for Michigan State than is being said out loud. And it's because the eye test on Minnesota is about as bad as you can possibly have it right now. You can go through and cut up numbers. Bart Torvik is a great site. It's a KenPom alternative where you can sort by date and see how teams have been doing. And over the last 4 weeks of the season, Minnesota is ranked 121st in the country. They're closer to Rutgers and Michigan than they are the top 6 teams in this conference. And that backs up the results. Like, you go through it, they've lost 4 of their last 5. But even in the win that they had against Penn State, they were down 41-18 at home at the barn in the first half to Penn State.
I know.
It's not like Illinois came in and blitzed you. It's Ace Baldwin and a really bad basketball team. So I think something's wrong. There are, we'd play the rumor game sometimes on our show, which I don't necessarily want to do. But if you listen to the rumors, there are some pretty heavy rumors of players that are 1 to 2 feet out the door from this Minnesota roster in the portal world. That is one thing I think we can say, even though Michigan State is sliding, they're not dealing with those issues right now. Like, everybody who's on this roster, whether they're going to return next year or not, is not looking for their next destination right now. They're very locked in on how important the legacy of Michigan State basketball is and needing to deliver. So that alone makes me think Michigan State gets a win here. But you're right. Both teams have been really, really bad for 3 weeks.
I just also flinch too whenever I hear the Christie name, whether it be because, Max didn't do great here last month and his brother Cam bludgeoned Michigan State over the head with a hammer last time he played. It's just, no matter how bad Minnesota has been playing, and they have been playing pretty lousy, I just always remember that game that Michigan State played at the barn. It did not go well. So we're going to talk more about the Big Ten tournament here. We're going to get to I'm sorry to drag on here and just, use your team over there in Ann Arbor as a pinata, but I generally got to pick your brain about it. But first, need to talk your people's ears off about FanDuel Sportsbook, the number 1 sports book in America. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every single game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number 1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That is $200 to use on point spreads, money lines, and you can even pick who's going to win it all. Or hey, for championship weekend, what I did last night? I picked 4 conference tournament winners, put like $3.81 on it. It's to pay out 600 smackaroos. I could use some of that in my life. They have all sorts of great bets for conference championship week. Of course, March Madness. You already know that they're going to have it hooked up over there. So what are you waiting for? Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Now let's get one of the greatest gamblers that I know. I mean, let's just keep throwing flowers at this guy. Greg Waddell, Sleepers Media. Look at just a hot streak over here, and I kind of want to start there. Big Ten tournament starting. Purdue, certainly the odds-on favorite. Last I checked, they are plus 100 to win the Big Ten tournament. I swear I'm not making a pun on Sleepers Media, but what's your sleeper team for this tournament to win, Greg?
Ooh, it's tough. It is tough to make a serious argument for anybody, honestly, because I think Purdue might be the best value on the board. I mean, they're
Okay.
even money. They're plus 100. To me, it's insane. If you've watched this conference the last 2 years, that we're not laying at least some minus number next to their name. They've won 3
Right.
straight championships. I think this team's rolling. I have a hard time seeing anybody beat them, but I will throw out 2 names I think could make a deep run in this tournament. The first is a mid-range sleeper. They're the 3 seed. It's Nebraska. Let's not forget, Nebraska is the only team that blew out Purdue this season. I mean, ran them off the court for 40 minutes in Lincoln. Yeah. There is some voodoo in that gym, but I think they match up pretty well with the way Fred Hoiberg defends his posts. He likes to throw traps at you from all directions. It would put pressure on Purdue's guards. Now, I know we're projecting to a championship game, but Nebraska has a pretty good draw to me on the bottom half of this bracket. They would get either Indiana or Penn State likely in the first game. I know Indiana's rolling right now, but Nebraska had success against Indiana earlier in the season. And then a potential semifinal with Illinois, which, in my opinion, after seeing Illinois play Purdue, you can't tell me that Illinois wouldn't have it hanging in the back of their mind that they don't want to see Purdue again, potentially. I don't think they're itching to get back to a third chance there. So gotcha. I like Nebraska. I've seen them about 7-1, 7.5-1. That's a good number. And then a super long shot, which is almost assuredly not going to win this tournament, but you might be able to make some money if you sprinkle it and they get hot early. I like Maryland's path here. I think they're the 12 seed, very similarly to Ohio State last year, where they clearly are one of the top 4 or 5 talented teams in the league, but just haven't been able to put it together, have had some injuries and haven't played well. Well, now they get a Rutgers team that's super banged up, that they beat by 16 points just a couple weeks ago. Then you get Wisconsin, who might be the worst team in the country since February 1st. And then you get a Northwestern team that's missing 2 starters. So to me, if Jameer Young is going to be the best player on the court in all 3 of those games, which he definitely is, there is a world here where Maryland finally makes some shots and all of a sudden looks up and they're in the semifinal against Purdue. I would never pick them to beat Purdue, but if you bet it before the tournament starts, you would have some pretty nice hedge opportunities if they actually get there.
Using the V word, value, right there. God, once you talk it out, God, I actually don't hate the Terrapins as much as I probably should as a 12 seed. What is the best opening round game? And it doesn't have to be the Wednesday games. You can jump forward to Thursday, because when you say that Nebraska could be taking on Indiana, that seems like a great game to have on either in the background if you're not going to be an avid fan, or if you're going to be dialed in like us. That's going to be appointment television. I think that'll be a great one.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the more entertaining side of the bracket is the bottom half. Once again, that's no disrespect to Purdue, but as good as they are, I'm not itching to keep watching Purdue games right now. The reality is with this league, as you know well this year, and my team's the worst of it, this is a really mediocre year in this conference. There are not a lot of consistent basketball teams, let alone good ones. To me, the game to watch early would be Ohio State, Iowa, because I think if there are teams that are truly on the bubble that have a legitimate chance to work their way into the field, it's both of these. To me, if either Ohio State or Iowa gets a win in the first round and then were to beat Illinois in the second round, I think suddenly you're looking where they're right on the cut line, maybe even slightly in the field. Both teams have been playing better. Jake Diebler has that team looking completely different than they did earlier in the season. So I won't be surprised whatever happens there. And then any game Illinois plays is entertaining after that. So that one where they play the winner will be really, really fun to watch.
I've already doom spiraled into either Ohio State or Iowa winning enough games where, hey, if only there was a direct head-to-head comparison against a Michigan State team who's also on the bubble. Believe me, I've been doing that for a few days now. But let's deflect. This is something I love to do. I'm just going to deflect from my issues and my problems. And Greg, if you just want to hang up, I completely understand, because I'm sure you're sick and tired of talking about the Michigan Wolverines. But I have to know, man, you have your finger on the pulse way closer than I do with Michigan. Is Jawan Howard most likely back next year? Is that actually the expectation?
It depends on who you believe, which is the most frustrating thing to me as a fan ever. I think any rational human being would part ways with him at this point, but
yes,
we don't have that by all accounts. So I think my read on the situation is that the athletic director Ward Manuel wants to bring him back. And my secondary read on the situation, again, this is some message board stuff, but my secondary read on the situation is that there's enough people who would be upset if Jawan Howard is back, that there may be a play made on some bad news dropping on Ward Manuel's tenure here. I don't know what those rumors are, what the validity to them is, but there are enough people saying like there's some smoke here that Ward is going to have a real bad news drop coming. Again, my read connecting dots is that might never come to light if he were to fire Juwan Howard, and it might come to light if he doesn't. My pulse right now is he's not going to fire him. So things may get chaotic and interesting in the coming weeks.
Let's see if Ward actually has to do his job for the first time in how long has he been there? A decade, let's call it. I truly have no idea how long he's been there. Let's call it a decade. Have you heard any good argument for keeping Jawan? Because that's what I can't wrap my head around too, is that I haven't even heard any convincing reason other than, hey, Fab Five, he's one of our guys. Hey, that's not good enough. Have you heard any compelling argument to bring him back?
I have not heard a compelling argument, but I will do my best to make a compelling argument.
Oh, please do. Okay.
So, I'm arguing against what I want to happen and arguing against my heart here. But there's one thing that frustrates me in the bashing of Juwan Howard at a public level here. It's when people discredit the two good teams he had at Michigan and try and give all the credit to John Beilein, which to me, the COVID year where he just inherited Xavier Simpson and John Teskey, you stumbled into a decent team. I think they were like 18-13 that year. They would have made the tournament. Fine, whatever. The next year, though, was a Juwan Howard roster through and through. Like you had a holdover of Eli Brooks, who, by the way, was never a quality player under John Beilein, but became a 2-year good starter for Juwan Howard. And then Isaiah Livers was the one big Beilein guy. Hunter Dickinson was a Juwan Howard recruit. Franz Wagner, I get he was a legacy guy. There was a very real world where the Beilein news dropped and he hadn't committed to Michigan yet, and he wasn't going to because he was spooked off by it. Juwan earned that commitment and developed him into a really good player. And then the transfer portal guy, like two of the most important players on the roster that won the Big Ten, was third in the country, were Shawnee Brown and Mike Smith, who were 100% Juwan portal guys. So we have seen Juwan Howard have a great season, a Big Ten championship season that was his roster, that required him to do the elements of roster building that he has failed so dramatically in the last 2 years. Like if you go out and get Mike Smith and Shawnee Brown the last 2 years, instead of Terrence Shannon, who's now playing for Illinois, and Caleb Love, who's now playing for Arizona, these teams probably really aren't that bad. But he botched those situations so horribly that it pissed off Hunter and he went to Kansas, and it left you with a completely bare cupboard with nothing you can do this year. That's the only argument, is a real belief that who Juwan Howard was that year is closer to who he really is. And then the realization that is true in this era in college basketball, in the transfer portal era, you can go from last in the league to second in the league in an offseason. You can. Certainly. But you have to nail what you're doing. And I would, if I'm Ward Manuel, I would need to see a 30-slide presentation on what my summer plan is. Yeah. And if I believe that plan, then maybe there's a world.
The first 5 slides better be burnt up on, I'm going to bring in people that could dribble a basketball properly, because I can't believe he's rostered a team that has 2 guys that could dribble a basketball. One of them was a part-time player this year, and the other guy was playing on a peg leg. And everywhere else, it's like, they're kind of forwards. They don't really dribble the ball, but that alone blew my mind. And sure, the Caleb Love thing, whether he thought he had him, whatever, different discussion. But I do want to end on this, Greg. I do want to zoom out of the Big Ten. I want to get into some A-10 talk, some Loyola basketball talk, because Drew Valentine, first of all, snubbed for Coach of the Year over there. You want to talk about an actual snub that we can actually get upset about? There it is right there. But in my dream scenario, whether it was here for 2 more years, 7 more years, I want Drew Valentine to be the heir apparent, okay? Him or Scott Drew, but let's focus on Drew Valentine right now. Do you think I should be panicked that, Drew could be on the move this very offseason because he's done it that great that quickly at Loyola? Or is that too far-fetched, you think, in your opinion?
I don't think it's completely far-fetched. I think, my read on the situation is, for starters, Drew is very happy at Loyola. He's not. This is not a situation where, he's going to have to shut down rumors that he's looking to leave the way his predecessor had to do at Oklahoma, right? Because and look, it's a jumping off job. Like, you're going to go from Loyola either to an even larger mid-major or a decent program in the high majors, or I think if he crushes it enough, he could get a job as big as Oklahoma, if not bigger. I think right now it seems that there's a little bit of a misprice on Drew Valentine as a coach in the market for at least what I believe he is. I think for some reason, I mean, he didn't win Coach of the Year in his conference. They just gave that to Richmond's coach, Mooney, who also a good coach, also had a great year. But for whatever reason, the hype that Drew Valentine had 2 years ago, where he had picked up from Porter with Lucas Williamson still and made the tournament, that hype dissipated after last year's horrible year. And nobody seems to have noticed that he went from last place to a share of a conference title in one offseason because he navigated the portal so well at a school with no NIL, no support. And he's out here landing 4-star recruits from overseas and killing the portal. And he has a plan for next year already. So I think it's only a matter of time. I don't think it's going to be this offseason because there's a lot of bigger name candidates for these large scale openings. But with the job market, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, we could have somebody from out of nowhere take the Louisville job, and suddenly there's a different job open that we don't expect that maybe is a perfect fit for Drew. So what I would tell Michigan State fans, if they want to see him, if you're hoping he becomes the next coach, I would say this. I don't think he's going to wait around forever. I don't think this is a world where if Tom Izzo wants to stay 15 more years until his deathbed, Drew's not going to wait for his dream job there. It's not his dream job. And that people may not think that's true. His dream is to coach in the NBA one day. Okay. But if the timing works out, I mean, he would run through a wall to get to East Lansing. And I think he would be so good. Like the resources that are rumored to be available with this program that aren't being used right now.
No kidding. Right.
He'd just be so good. The things he's doing at Loyola with 0 would be turned up to 100 at a place that is primed for it.
Man. So you just brought up Louisville's job, and I've never felt happy for anyone that takes that job because no matter who it is, like, oh my God, they're going to go over so well with that Cardinals fan base. I know we're going way off on a tangent right now, but Greg, me or you can coach Louisville next year, and it'd be market improvement, I think. That's how bad things went down there. But I'll let you go. I'll let you relax, I guess, before your week really picks up. Anything you want to plug here before we let you go and glue your eyeballs to a television screen for the next 4 weeks?
No, I appreciate you having me. It's always fun. Just go follow Sleepers Media. We're doing previews and recaps for all the big conference tournaments this week. We'll do the same for the NCAA tournament. So we'll be over there. I'm a huge fan of the show, Matt. You've crushed it this season, and I hope truly for you and the fans' sake, I hope this ends on a positive note for you guys. You deserve it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, just for the first time all academic year, something positive. That'd be really nice. That'd be cool. No, you guys do great work over there at Sleepers Media, and thanks for babysitting me in that first segment. I can't stand it anymore. All right, guys. Hey, we'll be back tomorrow. Talk about the team we know and love, your Michigan State Spartans, here on Locked on Spartans. Until then,